you are always thinking in the back of your mind, I hope everything's okay, because it feels good. You've got the culture, you got the momentum, you've got things going. It's that blind spot. I look back on that now, and that thing that just hits you upside the head, and you're like, damn, I should have been paying attention to that. I poured myself another drink, and I started thinking, how in the world am I going to live as an ex-convict? Do I want to live as an ex-convict? Can I live as an ex-convict? And my girls, I mean, they don't need the stain of a dad, that they're going to have to deal with. It's an ex-con. And so I had another drink. I got out the pen and paper, and I started thinking all the friends that had been friends and supportive. Put the pen down, poured another drink, grabbed the keys to the car, and went down to the garage. And I didn't know if I was going to go hit a tree or if I was just going to let the car run. And it was like, Matt, something hit me. What in the hell are you doing, Brent? You're the glass half full guy. You're the optimistic guy. You aren't this guy. And what a fool. And at that moment, I thought, whatever happens, I said, I'm going to be a survivor through this. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to be pointing fingers and doing and feeling sorry for myself. I'm at least going to try to make my family proud of how I handle this situation.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I appreciate you guys checking in on me. And I'm going to be doing a podcast with Brent Cassity, and Brent's got a fascinating story. And I've heard some of it. I know a little bit of the story, but it's a lot like, it's not the typical story because, well, one, it's extremely unique, but not just that, it's not like a bank robber or something where it was, he robbed 5 banks and the story's over. He's got a long story. There's a lot of different things going on, a lot of moving parts. So it should be super interesting. Really interesting guy. Also, he runs the podcast. I'm pretty sure you have a book. Let me switch here to this. I'm not great at this yet. Do you have a book that came out, right?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. You've got a book, you've got a podcast, and we're going to go ahead and get into Brent's story. And so check this out. So Brent, we talked a little bit the other day, and you started telling me your story. And I remember usually I talk to somebody and they'll tell me, they'll talk for 5 minutes or something, but I could tell right away, like the more we talked, the more I was like, oh, wow, this is way, way more of a story than typical,
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you want to start off by just kind of telling me like where'd you, where were you born? Like how?
Yeah. So man, I thought growing up as a kid, I grew up in Southwest Missouri, a small town. It's about 2.5 hours, 3 hours from St. Louis, down in kind of a hillbilly country, but it was good. It was kind of like, one of those kids when you're growing up, you ride your bike around the neighborhood, everybody, gets picked for teams. You play touch tackle football and basketball and baseball, and you go home at night when the lights go down and you get, your dinner and you're fed. My dad and mom were actually from a really small town that was about 30 minutes down the street from Springfield. It was Buffalo, Missouri. And so growing up as a kid, I thought we were living a pretty normal life. I had a bigger than life dad in my life. He was one of those guys, in his high school, he won the state championship. He's valedictorian. He went on to be a D1 athlete, basketball and track in college. And then he went to law school, graduated #1 in his class. He zoomed out of there, won some big court cases. And then he got into business and became kind of a big deal. But as a kid, all I was thinking is, wow, I want to be just like him. He's so cool. And, I was thinking about, 7th, 8th grade, I was 6'1". I was like a 7-footer, it's being 7th grade, 8th grade, being 6'1" is huge because the kids don't, the boys don't grow. The girls, get taller, but I couldn't wait to get to high school. It was like, I'm finally going to be able to, show it all up. Well, Dad calls us into the room one night and says to my brother and I, he says, hey, guys, he said, I've gotten into a heap of trouble with a bank I own, and I think I'm just going to plead guilty and do a plea bargain, and we're going to start from scratch. And he just lays this on us. I'm like,
You didn't see
what
this
in
coming
the
at all. You didn't know there was any.
no, no, no. And I think at that time when you're a kid, you've got your own world. There might have been some stuff on the news or whatever, but he was kind of always a little bit on the news because he was doing he was an attorney, he was doing cases, he was in business, and so that I didn't even really pay attention to that at that age. So there might have been a little bit of that, but totally came out of the blue. So his mouth is moving, and I'm thinking, how in the world is this going on? The guy that I idolize is bigger than life is telling me that he's been tied up and caught up in a bank thing. And then he drops the bomb and says, we're going to start over and move to St. Louis, Missouri. And I was like, oh my God. It's like one of the worst meetings of a family gathering I've ever had. So we move up to St. Louis, and worst time to move as a kid, summertime, nobody's around, you don't go to school. So I was, my release and escape was always playing basketball. And so I went to this basketball camp my dad got me into, and ended up going that summer. Yeah.
Can I ask you one question real quick? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't interrupt, but so your father, you skated over, like he got in trouble for some bank stuff. Like what was, and did he go to jail? Did he get?
Yes, he did. And that was one of those things where, as a kid, he ended up getting 6 months in prison. He got charged with bank fraud and insurance, or not insurance fraud, but tax fraud. Given a loan to a guy that was on the board of the bank. I'm not even sure if that's an illegal transaction anymore, but back then it was. And then there was an insurance thing with a mobile home park he owned. He appreciated instead of depreciated. That's all confusing stuff, but that's what happened.
All right. I understand what happened.
Exactly. So the thing of it with us as a family is that I just remember when it finally came down to it, and we moved in, up to St. Louis, and we started going to Marion, Illinois, where he was in prison, was, man, I can't believe we're this family. We were wealthy, we kind of had everything going. And all of a sudden we are that family that goes and visits my dad in prison every weekend. I remember, pulling up to that prison. And first thing is, as a kid, you're like, I wonder if he looks okay, like he's going to be in prison clothes and all these things that you think that you have in movies and whatever. And he comes out and he's tan, he looks good. I'm thinking, okay, that's great. So when I leave, though, I'm thinking to myself at 15 years old, Matt, this will never happen to me. This will never happen to me. I'll never find myself here. And, there's some weirdness too when there's a prison.
Statistically, if your parents,
I know, I fall into.
You have like 5 times. You're 5 times more likely.
Yeah. That's a scary number, isn't it? But I do, the other thing that was kind of weird was that you move into a place, because we moved into a new neighborhood. My dad's in prison, and there's, the oddness of it is we didn't really know how to handle, where's your dad or where's your husband, and so we kind of said he's out of town working, and that was kind of true because he did have a prison job. He was out of town, so we got around that, but I'm sure everybody in the neighborhood thought, what in the world is going on with this family? And it was kind of a weird thing to start a new high school and your dad's in prison and you're not telling anybody that your dad's in prison. And then he came back and then it was all normal. So dad got out of prison. He lost everything except for one unsexy business. And it was prearranged. It was called National Prearranged Services, and it prearranged your funeral service. So you would actually, Matt, go take and make arrangements, and you'd freeze the cost of that funeral. And you could even fill out a little book that would have your pallbearers and your music and everything. And so everything was taken care of. So your family didn't have to worry about it. The burden was taken off of them. Not a jump off your page. wow, that's really a cool company. But it really had a purpose, and it really took off because it was kind of a newer idea going into the early 80s. And I got into the company about 10 years after it started, got out of college. I had done some sales and stuff and I was going to go to law school. And that was the other thing. I was a political science major and did theater, was a minor, and I was going to be a trial attorney. And I don't know if I've always blamed on being left-handed, but I was so bad at taking standardized tests. You give me like, Matt, you give me like a thing to be able to have an essay, I could do great. I mean, it wasn't like I graduated with a 3.4 in college. I wasn't on the dunce scale, but if you put a standardized test in front of me, I was on the dunce scale. I mean, I was the dumb scale. So I couldn't get it on that LSAT, what I needed to get. And so I did a pivot, and I thought, I think I'm pretty good at sales. Why don't I go talk to my dad about this? And so we had a sit down discussion. I said, Dad, I think I'd like to go into this, but I don't want to be in your shadow on this deal. I mean, you're the guy here in St. Louis. And I said, where can I go to just pass fail? Just see if I'm any good at this. He said, well, you go down to Texas. We just opened up a place down in Texas, and there's a funeral home there in Austin. I was like, oh, sign me up. I was 22, 23 years old. Austin, Texas, try something out. And so I went down there, Matt, and it worked really great. Found out I was really good at it. Won all the national contest stuff. We were in 3 states at the time. So I was the new kid, and I had my own thing down in Texas. And so I was at this time 24, 25 years old. Well, Dad didn't have a whole lot of interest in the sales side. We'd gotten into owning an insurance company that funded these pre-arrangement contracts. So if you had a pre-arrangement contract, we would buy for like $5,000. We would buy a $5,000 life insurance policy, and so those two companies coexisted. I had no interest in that insurance company. My dad loved that world of investments and trading and all that, and I hated math. And that was one of the great things about political science. You didn't have any math. You didn't have to take math.
Right. So he started. So when you say he had an insurance company, he started an insurance company. He was funding the insurance company himself, or was he like an agency of a large?
Okay, so when you first start an insurance company, you usually have a bigger insurance company, and you grow yourself into the reserves and things that you need in the beginning. So those first few years, I forget what company it was, but as you grow in and you have your capital and surplus and your reserves and everything, and then you are able to stand out on your own. By the time I had gotten into the business, it'd been 10 years, we had a standalone insurance company.
So he's now taking the premiums that are being paid, and he's investing those premiums.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that too, Matt, is that in that world, everybody makes a claim. So
yeah,
everybody dies. So you've got to be real careful with how that all works. I mean, and it's a highly regulated business. I mean,
right.
you don't just play around with insurance, because in every single state you have to get approved. Your contracts are approved. Everything goes through, and not every state is the same, but every state usually audits you on an annual basis, and you are pretty tied into what you can and can't do. So that's one of the things, my biggest thing out of my life, looking back on it now after I, went to prison and all the things that happened in my world, my biggest mistake is that I had no interest in that. I ended up creating a very big company we went from 3 states to 22 or 25 states. And I just looked at it like, I'm just putting the money over there. They can take care of that as long as, and the thing of it was, there was never any issue with the fact that we paid for funerals, and the funeral directors got paid their growth, and they got paid their funeral contracts, and everybody got their money. That wasn't we went through 30 years of that being that. Our thing was much more complicated. And it was drawn out for a lot longer time. But backing up though, Matt, we got into this and it really took off. The company grew. My brother came into the company when he got out of college, and he was more technology savvy. But we had a family idea, and I think I talked to you about this, Matt, where we talked about, like when Queen Elizabeth died just a few weeks ago, you expect the highlight of her life. Everything that ever happened, you expect it now, and you want it now, and they already have it. It's done. You don't do that with your grandparents, your mom, your dad, your uncle, and your aunts. And so we decided we wanted to be the filmmakers of everybody else. And that got us into two different things. We got into a production company, and we started owning cemeteries because we figured cemeteries are a place that people go to remember. So we would actually go to people who own cemetery property and offer that. This would have been in the early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. And it would have been before YouTube and all
yeah. I was trying to think about you, putting together, because when my mother died last year, and they put together, we gave them a bunch of photographs, and they basically popped it into a format.
Mm-hmm.
You pick what you wanted, but it's basically the same thing. I can go on, like
anybody can do it now.
Yeah, Ivato. Is it Ivato?
Yeah.
What's the name of that? Envato. I'm signed up for Envato, and you just plug in throw in 20 pictures and pick some music, and it comes up with it for you. But you were way before doing it.
Well, yeah, and we basically started that, and we got into the funeral side of it too, so for visitations, and we would take a little clips out of the life story part if they had that, and put it into the music and the pictures and whatever. So we were really at the forefront of that. I mean, there were so many, strangely enough, there were so many competitors of ours that just said we were like sacrilegious, putting a TV in a room, and people are. But the really great thing about it was really more of a comfort, because it was more of what people were used to, watching TV, bringing back memories, giving things for people to talk about. Oh, I remember when your dad used to coach our little league team, or you share these memories together instead of that uncomfortable. A lot of this too was because we were from the funeral business, so I was very uncomfortable going to funerals. How can I make funerals more comfortable so that I feel okay being there? So you
bought the cemetery. Sorry, I got you off track. You were investing in cemeteries.
Yeah.
And what was the process? So
we would actually go to people who own cemetery property, and we would offer them more or less to buy another product. And that was to start their life story. And it was sold in chapters. You tell us your earliest memory, your high school memories, your school and college, when you started your family and kids and whatever. And it just kind of built. And we walked people through their scrapbook so that they kind of warmed up through it. And as this got and came through, we did about 18 to 20,000 of these life stories. So we did a lot of life stories. But in the meantime, we were getting a lot of press, because nobody in this arena, nobody was doing anything different than, basically going from a horse and buggy to a car or a hearse. We were doing something where we were saying, we were wanting to revolutionize the way people remember their life. There's an African proverb where they talk about when someone dies, a library burns. So we were thinking, wouldn't it be cool if we could just become a library of lives for the community? So when you didn't know somebody, your grandmother or whatever, you could go to our console at our cemetery, touch up and pull up your grandmother or great grandmother you didn't know, and all of a sudden there you are. So we were really, we were excited about this. This was something that we got covered by Time Magazine and Fortune, Forbes. Entertainment Tonight picked us up when we bought Hollywood Cemetery out in Los Angeles. We were on there a couple of times. So we really got a lot of press. And then HBO came calling and created a documentary that was called The Young and the Dead. And that kind of encapsulated everything that we were doing, except for the unsexy part, which was the part I told you about in the beginning, which we were doing prearranged funerals. But that was the big part of our business, actually. So we got all this going, and everything was going great. I met my wife when she was 13-year-old and I was 15, and we've kind of gone through every life stage, and we've had 3 kids now, and things have blown up. Life's great. Got a nice house in Nantucket for the kids, and we live in St. Louis, and it's all great. And then one day, and it kind of happens, these blindside things, Matt, especially if you're in business and you've got a big company. Our company wasn't that big. I mean, it was big enough. We had about 400 some odd people that worked for us. But you feel like
400 people in 25 states. That sounds like a big company.
It was big. It was big, but not. There's gigantic companies. There's thousands. There's people that have thousands of people. We were big enough. We were mid-level, but you are always thinking in the back of your mind, I hope everything's okay. Because it feels good. You've got the culture, you got the momentum, you've got things going. It's that blind spot. I look back on that now, and that that thing that just hits you upside the head, and you're like, damn, I should have been paying attention to that. I was filling up my gas tank one day, and I get a phone call from the president of our insurance company. We didn't talk much, but he said, Brent, I just got a really weird phone call with the lady from the insurance department in Ohio. And she's in the investigative division and says that she's got information that's going to bring our company down. And it was like, I was literally filling up my gas tank, and it was like just this feeling of dread came over, because I had felt this before with my dad when I was 15, but it was much different this time because we're all in this together, and I'm in this with him. And in the moment of this happening, the part that isn't a surprise is that we had a gigantic reinsurance company, and they're the biggest in the world out of Germany. And for those, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on reinsurance. It's just a smaller company. You got an A+ rated insurance company, and you basically push your liability off, and they pay you a commission for your money, basically. And you can use that as a benefit to selling as you go out and sell, that you've got this gigantic umbrella that's your big protection. So anyway, we had the largest reinsurance company in the world that we were doing business with, but they had kind of gotten backwards in the market when 9/11 happened, and we had cut a fat deal with them, and they wanted to come back and renegotiate. Now, on my world, I didn't even know about this because I was the stupid one that didn't pay attention to what we were doing on the insurance side. My dad, way too smart for his own good, I think. When I talked about him earlier, I also think Dad kind of kept a chip on his shoulder. He's from a small town. He always wanted to show everybody that he was a smart guy. So the easy thing to do for somebody like me, who's not the smartest guy in the room, is, okay, you want to renegotiate, what do we need to do? Because you got a sweet deal. Dad wasn't in the contract. No, hell no. So we go into arbitration, and that probably wasn't smart, because the arbitration for the company that we were up against was the size of a country, so they could outspend us at any point through discovery and all that. So we started spiraling into, before any of this happened on the regulatory side, spending $7, $8, $9 million on legal fees, hitting our capital and surplus. So that was unfortunate before we ever got into this. And as it went, Matt, and it's kind of hard to explain out there to the world of people listening to this, but those things can leak out. Those arbitrations are supposed to be private, sealed processes, but they're not. And that started leaking out into all the states that we were in. Probably came from the company that we were up against, because it became an advantage for them to have that happen to us. And later we found in discovery that's exactly what happened. But as it was happening, it was a nightmare. All of a sudden, you have a regulatory world in all the states we were in asking questions, wanting every document you have of everything that you're doing. And there quite honestly wasn't enough hours in the day. So what happens with me is my dad and our attorney, who's been with us forever, my trustee of this trust. That's how, by the way, that was how we kept that trust. National Premier Services, is it was in a trust. That's why Dad didn't lose that. It was in my name, my mom's name, and Tyler's name, which was my brother. So that's how that company existed, and that's how it went on.
He once conned Bank of America out of $250,000 using nothing but a fake ID and his charm. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
So Dad comes to me and he says, Brent, he says, we've got to get out there and talk to these regulators, tell them what we're doing, our story, and back up, because we've got a forest fire. I said, great. I said, tell me what all we're doing, because I'm the ignorant son who completely ignored the wrong things in our business. Now this is the one I need to go talk about. But I wanted to do it, Matt. I wanted to put on the cape. I wanted to show my dad that I was, going to save the day. And I really thought I could. And Dad said, I can't go out and talk because I'm an ex-felon. I can't be at the regulatory table and say, hey, here, what do you think? So I ended up, I was flying all over the place, Matt. It was, I don't even know how to explain it. It was dizzy time, because you never thought that you could get enough time to get to the next place, to get to the next meeting, to get to the next answer. And they were all mad. You're not getting me this, you're not getting me that. And it was a free for all. And you could feel it too. You could feel like, even though we were still doing business on the real world, it's like you were sucked in a vacuum of a dark place that nobody saw except you and some few other people where you were trying to save everybody's out here. And you go back, you were living two different lives. I was flying all around, and then I was playing golf, at the 2-man deal at the country club, or we were going out to dinner with our friends. And so I felt like I was Brent in this regulatory nightmare, and Brent going to the kids' functions at the school, trying to make things seem normal. Well, eventually things didn't come out normal. I didn't save the day. I thought a couple of times that we were there, and our thing went from an investigation of the regulatory world to started criminal, and we went through 6 years. And I was indicted in 2010, and so I was indicted for 3 years before we ever got to the part where we were going to go to trial, or there was going to be a plea bargain. And that was a weird time.
What was the crux of their issue?
Well, it was kind of complicated, because it wasn't that we weren't paying our stuff.
Right.
Normally you would think, okay, well, you guys are really bad because you're not paying for the funerals. You're not paying the funeral directors what they're supposed to be paying. It wasn't that. We had a case that happened back in '94 with the state of Missouri, and it came down to, and you might understand this, Matt, because you kind of have that background. When you wrote a funeral contract in Missouri, it had to go into a funeral trust. And in that funeral trust, you had to put 80% of the cash in there, and then 20% of it could be done for your administrative and sales or whatever. What you did with that 80% was up to you. You could invest in commodities, stocks, bonds, whatever. We bought insurance policies. So the question was, what is the value of that insurance policy? Is it the cash amount of what's been paid on that policy? You might have paid in months premium, you might have paid 4 months premium, you might have paid it off. Or is it the face amount? Is it $5,000 immediately when it goes in there? Because from our argument, it was that no matter what happens, whether you paid 1 month, 2 months, all of it, we were responsible for the payout, all of it. So our argument was it was worth face value, and the states said it was worth the cash value in the trust. Makes a big difference when you're valuing the numbers. So eventually, it comes down to we go to a statute interpretation before a judge, and the judge says, well, I kind of see it like a car wreck. You don't look at it as an investment, you look at it to pay off for the wreck. So once that happened, they went back and they said, okay, we're going to do a settlement. And we were able to do business that way up until 2008, until the federal government came in and they had the same argument. So we were fighting over something that was, is this business sustainable? And will this business be able to pay out by the cash that you created from the policies to continue on for the next 30 years? There were some other issues, though, Matt, that were in there that's even more complicated is in each state, who was the beneficiary of the insurance contract? Even though we went and got it approved through each state, that they assigned all the rights and benefits over to the insurance company or NPS, because in the end, we were the responsible party to pay.
You're the one who has to pay. You're the one who has to pay the funeral. So you don't want them to be the beneficiary. They take the money and leave.
Right. So that ended up to be a huge thing. That they came back on us and said, well, we couldn't be the beneficiary, and this isn't your policy, and so on and so forth. But that was already agreed to. It was already the people assigning it over were the people who were buying the funeral. They didn't have any problem assigning the rights and benefits as long as it was going to be paid. So those were two big issues that became debatable issues. And the reason I say this gets really complicated is because you can get into a conversation with somebody from a federal government that doesn't know anything about insurance, like me, but people who are in our company that did know a lot about insurance. And they even said things like, well, you don't have enough money if everybody dies today to pay everything off. And well, of course we don't. That's not the way insurance company works.
Yeah.
You have actuaries.
State Farm doesn't have enough.
No, nobody does. But here's the crazy thing about it is, Matt, is that somebody who's an assistant attorney can say that, and then you have to defend an outrageous comment. You can't go to the bank and withdraw out all money. You can't, but in insurance, it's directly set up for actuaries to say, okay, what's your age? Have you had any operations? Have you had cancer? Have you had heart attacks? You balance all that out and put it into this gigantic equation, and then you insure people. So
an actuary, anybody listening, an actuary is the person that calculates all the death rate, who's going to die at what ages, and so how much money you have to have and how much money needs to be paid in to pay out those policies. Like, that's the person that crunches all those numbers for insurance companies or actuaries. Sorry. Yeah,
no, that's exactly it, Matt. And I'm saying all that just because I'm just saying how deep it got. There were 12 million documents in this world.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about something that just got so big. And in the end, when you're fighting this, and 6 years of fighting the federal government, whenever you know this, Matt, you went through the federal deal, seeing United States of America versus your name, there's really not much more, anything I can think of is more intimidating than that. That's like, one of my friends said that was on one of my podcasts, Jason said, it's like saying, okay, you get to play the your beer softball league gets to play the LA Dodgers. You can play them,
right?
Just probably
not even close
play that well. You get to get on the same field. But anyway, going past all that, I had 3 daughters. I have 3 daughters, 3 beautiful daughters, very accomplished daughters that are in their 20s. Well, actually, Courtney's 30 now. But my kids were teenagers then, and one of the things is we were getting shellacked by the media. It was a big story. And I was very open with the kids, what we were doing, how it was going. And they had really supportive friends. They were really great athletes, and the coaches were very helpful. And so we just kind of cocooned ourselves, and we're not reading anything. We're not looking at all this stuff around. And we got through that. But one of the things when it finally got to it, my kids were like, Dad, you can't go to trial. I mean, when I looked at my thing that I had stacked, and this, how they do it, Matt, with Fed charges is, we had a charge of wire fraud. So any wire we would have made over the course of 30 years, mail fraud, any mail you would have sent out over the course of 30 years, money laundering, anything that you would have done or bought would be from the fruit of the poison tree. And then my charge that was something that was crazy that I couldn't even thought of because I didn't know about it. I allowed an ex-felon to work in the business of insurance, which the company started in 79, and Dad, in 1994, Congress passed a law that an ex-felon couldn't work in the business of insurance, and he did. So that carried a 5-year sentence. But how they stacked those charges, I got to drinking one night, just looking at my papers, and I got them out. I was looking at 938 years. I was thinking, man, I could beat maybe, let's say I could beat almost all these charges and maybe 2. Then you're looking at 40. It's like the weirdness of what you do and how you look at things, and what seems totally unreal and outrageous becomes part of your world that you really have to contemplate. Like, my God. Anyway, when we sat down after 6 years, I didn't have any money left, and going to trial seemed like I don't know what I would have thought going to trial at that time, but I was worn out. It was just hard to give up after fighting that long. But I told my girls, I get it. They said, Dad, take the plea. My plea bargain was from 0 to 5 years. And so
what they offer your dad?
His was 0 to 10 years. And there was 6 people indicted. It was my dad. It was me. It was our attorney, who happened to be my trustee, our investment advisor, and our CFO, and my dad's secretary or executive assistant. Those were the 6 people that were indicted. And it was they basically crafted it into, it was a conspiracy of all people. And once you have a conspiracy, you can tie everybody into everything, and everybody has to defend everybody else's.
Yeah, even though you're just selling policies, you don't know what the decisions are being made. You're now responsible for everything. All the conversations that your father and the advisor and the lawyer had for 10 years that you had nothing to do with, but you're lumped into the conspiracy, and as a result, you're now guilty of the decisions that they made because you were in some way a beneficiary of those.
Exactly. And and I look back at that, Mark, and I think, well, that's my fault, because when you own something, you should be making sure that I had a good friend of mine that owned a gigantic, he had the largest private insurance company in the United States. He was 10 years my senior, and he didn't like insurance, but he loved real estate and investing in real estate and just making things look great and hotels and all kinds of stuff. He was a really smart guy that way, but he didn't like insurance. And he told me one day, he said, Brent, he said, I know you don't like that. He said, just go out and get the very best there is and put them in. That's what I did. And he said, when my dad got sick, he said, and he told me, and I went out and this guy, he said, he's fantastic. And I took that advice in, and I thought that makes a lot of sense, but it would have been complicated. Family businesses are weird. That was Dad's world, and my world was over here, and we didn't walk in each other's territory, really. I didn't walk in Tyler's territory. We kind of worked around, and not that Dad and I didn't talk a lot. I mean, I talked to him all the time, but we didn't really cross into. If I would have gone to my dad and said, "Hey, listen, Dad, what I'm thinking," I just had a conversation with a friend of mine, and we're going to hire just a cool, fantastic, do it by the book guy for our insurance company. It would have been a kind of a weird conversation. So if I had to do it over again, we definitely would have had that conversation. We definitely would have sat down. But, at the time, all that was going on, it really didn't seem like that we had very many problems. I mean, that's the, the strange part of it, Matt, is that sometimes these things can come up on you when you think anymore, when I think everything is going pretty good, I start thinking, okay, what am I not paying attention to? Because that's the blind spot thing that kind of scares you is that when you think things are going really good, take a step back and make sure that you've got all the boxes checked, because that momentum thing can cross over some things where maybe you should be making a better focus on what you're doing. But going back to what you said, Matt, my world was my name was on the line. My dad's name wasn't. I should have definitely. And to this day, I look back and it was so complicated and what they were arguing and all these fancy people that were arguing fancy arguments. We were sloppy, clearly sloppy on the insurance side. We should have been much better. But we did have an in-house counsel that I believed a lot in. I thought was, handling the audits and doing the things, but we could have done it a lot better. Were we criminal? I certainly don't think there was any intentions on that, because if there was, I would have taken a whole scoop of cash and put it somewhere and lived a different life. But yeah.
I know multiple guys that when you hear their case and what went wrong, it's like, okay, well, that's civil. Like, that's a stretch to make that criminal. So it's but that's how the government does it. It's always like these guys that end up starting a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he's a con man. He's always been a con man. It's like, well, if he was a con man from the beginning, he wouldn't have opened the company in his name.
Exactly.
He wouldn't have run it for 10 years. And then what happens typically is something goes wrong and they try and cover it. Something else goes wrong, they try and cover it. So they start lying about things. And before you know it, they're so far in the hole, they're now realizing what I've done now is now I'm running a Ponzi scheme. And I can't turn around and go to the auditors and to the regulators and explain it, because I'm going to have to
too far in.
For the last 6 months, I've been lying to the investors and lying to on all the statements and continuing to take in money. And I've lost money, right, and I'm going to go to prison. So what do? They just continue to run a Ponzi scheme, hoping they can someday dig themselves out.
Yeah, hit the big one. Yeah.
5 years later, it all.
And I think the other thing that's kind of complicated about Ponzi schemes is first of all, Ponzi schemes aren't supposed to last very long.
Some of them do.
I know they do. But it's also, it kind of blurs the definition, because if you take the Social Security setup for the United States, it's only a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
But it's legal because it's the government's doing it. They're taking all new funds to fund past and current liabilities. But all that being said, the thing of it is once you get into the spin cycle, man, it's a tough one. What is it? 97% of the people that get indicted plea. And then if you go on from there, the people who go to trial, it's a tough, and that's the thing that people really don't realize. Not very many people go to trial.
No.
The government doesn't want to go to trial. And the attorneys that we have representing us, they're not used to going to trial, because they're used to going into the dark room back there and cutting deals, and then go play golf with the judge or go to the Christmas party with their people. But
so but let's go back to your daughters were telling you take a plea.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, how many guys, trust me, they made the right call, because here's the reason I say that is, do you know how many guys I know that were offered 3 years, went to trial, and ended up with 15 or 20?
Right.
Because they're like, no, I didn't do anything. Stop it.
Yeah.
That does it. Stop thinking it's fair. You've watched too much Law and Order.
Exactly.
That's not how it works.
And the thing of it was too is, man, I was guilty for sure, because I allowed my dad to work in the business of insurance. There was no getting away from that. And those jury instructions would be that I was in a position I should have known that as the president of the company. So that one had me dead to right. The other things that happened, I got to tell you, the thing that's so discouraging is that we had a really great company where a lot of people worked for a long time with us. I had created this division where we were kind of on the cutting edge, kind of like a pharmaceutical division that had really grown quickly, and really, we were the talk of the industry. And so there was a lot of fun things going on. And then we had our stuff that was going on with making our life stories. So it was an environment where I think people liked working for us. We liked doing what we were doing. And I think, the struggle is to be living the life I live now, looking at all those people's lives were affected, everybody's. And, and we got a black eye. The company that they loved and that they, spent, 15, 20 years with us, it's, was by the narrative of the world, was run by convicts and people who took other people's money. And it just, that's the part that sticks to me that you can't quite shake off, except there's no way that didn't affect people's lives. There's no way that all those people weren't having to figure out what were they going to do and where were they going to go. And, it's, I think the other thing you've gone through this too, Matt, is, finally, when you get to that point where you realize, okay, I'm in, you went fugitive, but you originally, then you got caught and they brought you in. There's that feeling of, okay, now this is my world. Now what am I going to do? Because it's the unknown. How do I make this work? And prison was, for me, I went to Leavenworth, and Leavenworth was kind of a different. They have there used to be USP, then they made it a medium, and then they've got the camp. And so, we went. I remember I had my mom and my brother and my wife with me, and we. Everybody gets processed at the big ugly place. 1879, I think, is when Leavenworth was built. It looks like Shawshank Redemption kind of.
I've seen that in Atlanta. They look.
They really look menacing.
Horrible, just terrifying looking.
They are, and when I had this pity party of myself. Like, once I realized I was going to plea, I was by myself. And we just got off a family call, and my mom and my brother said they were going to help with the girls and help with whatever, and if it's college and help Julie out and whatever. So we got off the phone, and the deal was, okay, we're going to plea, and Dad and I are going to go to prison. Kind of a heavy conversation of a family call, and so I started. I already had poured myself a drink, and kind of one of those just total poor me. How did this happen to me? How in the world could this have been? Just poor me. I poured myself another drink, and I started thinking, how in the world am I going to live as an ex-convict? Do I want to live as an ex-convict? Can I live as an ex-convict? Should Julie, who's been a warrior through this and is just, she should have worn a cape as far as how she kept the glue of the family together. She needs a fresh start. She should go with somebody else and be with somebody else. And my girls, they don't need the stain of a dad, that they're going to have to deal with. It's an ex-con. And so I had another drink. I got out the pen and paper, and I started thinking all the friends that have been friends and supportive. And here's your fatherly advice to the girls. And here's what you need to think about. And Julie, you need to get a fresh start. Put the pen down, poured another drink, and grabbed the keys to the car and went down to the garage. And I didn't know if I was going to go hit a tree or if I was just going to let the car run. And it was like, Matt, something hit me. Literally just like a bolt. What in the hell are you doing, Brent? You're the glass half full guy. You're the optimistic guy. You aren't this guy. And what a fool and quitter your kids would think you were by doing how a horrible way to go out. Julie would think you were the weakest of the weak. And at that moment, I thought, whatever happens, and it didn't look good. Whatever I was stepping into was the ugly stuff. I said, I'm going to be a survivor through this. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to be pointing fingers and doing and feeling sorry for myself. I'm at least going to try to make my family proud of how I handle this situation, even though it scares the shit out of me because I don't know what the next situation is. I just know that it's scarier than what I know. But it really helped me. It kind of steadied me. I kind of hit the whole rock bottom, Matt. The whole, I'm here and I don't want to be, and I'm never going back to that. And even standing at the gate of Leavenworth, I've got my mom, my brother, Julie. I just told him I loved him. I knew everything I knew and everything I loved was behind me, and everything that was beyond this fence was the big, dark unknown. But I had already dealt with and hit that rock bottom moment I'm going to survive this. Whatever it is, I'm going to walk into it. And, one of the things I think you learn, I think, Matt, you probably would agree with me. Nothing is as bad as your mind makes it out to be.
Yeah.
Nothing is as bad as your mind makes it out. Not even prison, not even prison. Walking through those gates, did it scare the shit out of me? Absolutely. Very menacing looking, ugly place. And, how they process and prisonize you through and make you feel, you kind of just feel it like the freedom's shedding off your skin,
And demoralizing.
Yeah, it's just, you just feel it. I mean, it's just, I don't know what that is, but whatever that is, it works.
Especially the position that you have been in, like
Yeah.
I don't think that you or myself, I had ever been in a position where someone was able to talk to me like I was subhuman.
A dog. Yeah.
Yeah. And
not even a dog. I treat my dogs great. It's like you said, subhuman.
The first time they start, the first person that says it, it's always like, or talks down to you, and then the next person and the next guard, and then you realize, like, oh, that's right. I'm
this guy.
I'm supposed to be talking.
I'm a piece of dirt. I'm a piece of shit.
Oh wow, he's not wrong. That's actually how. That's right. That's what that's what I would have expected you to talk to someone.
Did you worry, Matt, about, because it was one of my big worries, is like becoming part of that prisonized, institutionalized mentality? Because that was one of my big fears I want to stay me. I want to do whatever I can do to make me, whatever Brent would think and do out there. I don't want to lose that in here, because I saw a lot of guys. That's the one thing about Shawshank Redemption I think is interesting, is like some of those key phrases they say that, get busy living or get busy dying. That's kind of the two things you have in prison. The guys that give up and they're basically in a fetal position, and you see them laying and doing not anything. And then you see the guys that are working out, they're reading, they've got jobs.
Classes.
Yes.
Classes, yeah.
You see guys that are in shape, and you see guys that get fat. And there's like not really in betweens. It's either one or the other. And for me, it was like, man, I got to do whatever I can not to become that. Don't fall off that. And I use like 5 different strategy tools in prison that kind of were what I used when I was building the company, but I found that they worked for me in prison. Like the first one was especially when I got there, because you're like looking around thinking, well, what's everybody doing? Like, what do I do? What's everybody else doing? And I started looking around. So I really humbled myself, not to say a whole hell of a lot, just look around, what's going on. And then I sought people out. So, like, you're doing this, you seem like you're doing your time really well. Like, tell me about, so I talked to like 2 or 3 people, and those people like helped me get a good job, or they helped me kind of learn the prison rules and stuff. And I think that's important, not just in prison, but generally. If you humble yourself and you see somebody doing it right, go and talk to them, because it's like getting the answers to the test before the test. Get in, know, but first look around you, and then seek the people that you need help from, and it works.
Yeah, getting good routine, setting up your routine, and getting a solid routine as best as you can. Is crucial to keeping your mind
feeling like you've got your mind set. Yeah. The second thing that I had was like, it's kind of like the whole Shawshank thing with Andy Dufresne. He chips through that wall every night for 19 years. But the reason why he does it, he's got the Zihuatanejo that he's thinking of. It's the bluest of the blue waters, the whitest of white sands, the little place that he wants to put in the boat he wants to take people on fish. He's got all that playing in his mind. And I think that Zihuatanejo thing, that of what is, what do you got? What keeps you going? What fuels you up? Even in prison, I think you need that while you're living in that environment and when you get out.
To me, I just said, to me, it boiled down to purpose. I had to have a purpose. As once I got a purpose, that changed everything for me. Like everything became better, and I stopped hating being in prison, and it started being, almost like a blessing, because I suddenly had enough time to work on things that I loved. And so what was your, so
isn't that interesting though?
It is. It just took me a while, because I'm pig-headed. First I of course blamed everybody, and then
And that's
I got
easy.
old.
I mean, when you go
said,
through a lot, it's easier to blame somebody than to turn it on yourself and say, okay, what I need to work on.
But how stupid is that? How stupid, like especially in my case.
Yeah.
I'm totally guilty.
Yeah.
There's nobody to blame but me.
Right.
Still took me a year or two to figure that out, to realize, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, you see guys like go through bad marriages or whatever, and they might have been just total dicks, and they can't come to it until they finally realize that was really their fault. It's just like it's the same thing. But
you'll feel better. You'll feel better about yourself.
Yeah, and Dad and I had to go through kind of our own relationship struggle, and he, strangely enough, he died. He got out right when the March 17th when COVID hit, which I always think that had to be like the weirdest time to get out of prison.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole world had shut down. I went to pick him up at the airport and it was basically vacant. I was thinking how weird it was for him to walk into this world after he had a 10-year sentence and more or less it was shut down. And he was only out for a couple of months and died, but he wasn't well. But Dad and I never had that, that conversation because our thing was really I like I said, I idolized him. I thought he was a brilliant man, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without him and what he taught me in life. The thing I struggled with is that I never could quite figure out if I was being used or if he just had that much confidence in me. It was like because he was a great, and I say manipulator in a positive way, because if you're in the business, in the world business, you have to be. And he was very good at finding people and their talents and then building that up, just like a good coach. That's any NFL team or baseball team or whatever, you find those people, you build them up, you're a good coach. That was Dad. And so one of the things that I struggled with as a son as we kind of got through this ugliness is that he had gone through this before. And he knew, which I really didn't, the danger of running yourself into a burning house. And so we had this kind of a weird dynamic of, I think, I've kind of, Tyler, my brother, sent me this podcast that was really interesting, and how you can be two people. You could be somebody that loves you unconditionally and could use you. It can be both, and it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah.
And he could be that person, and he can. So for me, once I came to that, it wasn't one or the other. Dad was a really good dad, but did he think that I'd be the best person to go out and speak to the regulators? Yeah, he did. Yeah. And I thought I was too. So, looking back on it, would I do it again? Probably would. Isn't that weird? I went to prison, basically putting myself into that burning house. I just maybe now feel like maybe I could do it better. But at that time, the weight of the world of the company was either going to crash and burn, or we had to figure something out. And if it was slim to none, he went for slim and he tried to make it. And that's the weird thing, you go back into these weird big cases and like, what would you do now? And I don't even know if Julie would agree with this, my wife, but I would probably go back out in there and try to save the day, even though that's probably not the smartest thing to do, because I think you just wired a certain way. But I certainly don't blame my dad for that. But I think about it on my terms, with my own daughters, would I have put them into a burning house going into it if I had brought them into the company? And I don't know. I don't think I would. But that's the difference between, and maybe it's the difference between a father and a son and a father and a daughter. I don't know. It's kind of complicated though.
He once got plastic surgery because he didn't like the photo on his wanted poster. His legend precedes him, the way indictments precede arrests. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
Well, if it had all worked out, you wouldn't be asking yourself this question at all. So,
True.
you know,
Exactly.
in his mind, he may not have even for 1 second thought it was an issue. It's just like, oh, this is going to work.
Yes. That's a good point, because that's exactly how he thought.
Right.
He wasn't a naysayer and never thought. It was always this. And for the most part, and your point's very well taken, so many times it did work.
Right.
You know, as a family, we did a lot of things and overcame a lot of things and did bigger things than I ever thought that we could have. And I think a lot of it had to do with just, he always told me as a kid, Brent, you see, you got a good plan and you take action with it, you can accomplish anything. And I think that's, his mindset. His mindset was, we'll tackle this. We got through it before. I mean, in the 90s, I told you we went through that and we got through it. And I think he thought we'd get through it again.
Well, so I was just thinking, listen, a lot of the CEOs of these companies that start these massive companies and like the visionaries right now that are out there are really just con men that it worked out.
Sure.
Like Elon Musk, how many times he almost went under? If he'd gone under and lost all the investors' money, he'd be this piece of garbage, con man, don't trust him. He's a scumbag. Instead, this guy's a visionary. And so things just,
and you see that. I've read so many books, and God, I don't know how many books. I've read a book a week in prison, but all those different stories of people who made it, they did it by the skin of their teeth and got through it. And that's all about taking the risk.
The problem with like you and me now is how many times I have people talk to me and I'll say, you just think about doing this, you think about doing that. And they're like, yeah, bro, you ought to help. Like, would you be interested in coming? I'm like, nah, why? And I was, and they was like, why? I don't understand it. It sounds like an amazing idea. Like, why don't we do this? I'm like, because at my age and with my background, I can't fuck up again.
Yes.
And if this goes wrong with you, it's civil.
Yeah.
And maybe you claim, worst thing, you maybe get sued. Maybe you just claim bankruptcy. Most likely you just walk away and the company goes under. If I do it and I take people's money to invest in a company and it goes bad, I go back to prison. Even though it's civil, I'll never be given the benefit of the doubt that you're given. And I just can't take those risks anymore.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that, normal people.
It's a different life. I mean, I think a lot of people, and I think, Matt, a lot of people don't realize that, when we're in the position that we're in, it's a life sentence because you live as an ex-felon. It doesn't go away. It's like, okay, you were released. We are released and we are out of prison, which is fantastic. I not want to give that out, but you have to work really hard to get yourself even with everybody because we're the last of our breed. You can legally discriminate against an ex-felon.
Yeah.
Where you live, or if you want to get a job, it's legal. So you have to work a little extra hard to get that job or get that place, whatever you're trying to do. And I'm not saying that as like, oh, poor ex-felon. It's just that getting out, that's one of the things you've got to be equipped with to know. I've got to be mindset wise, know that I'm going to have to tackle that.
Yeah. Listen, I have, because of my podcast, I have guys reach out to me all the time asking me, extremely inappropriate questions. And it's like, whoa. It's like, listen, I can't answer that. No, I'm just saying hypothetically. I'm like, look, you don't seem to understand. I know that you think hypothetically somehow or another absolves you or me. But the truth is, I said, that's something that your idiot buddies told you. I said, I can't even have the conversation. No, but you wouldn't do anything. It doesn't matter. The fact is, they will simply go through your phone, get my name, add me to the indictment. I cannot go to trial because I cannot get on the witness stand and explain this guy asked me these questions and I didn't tell him anything. I said,
Right.
because as soon as I do, they're going to say, Mr. Cox, how many felonies have you pled guilty to? How long did you do in prison? How many frauds have you committed? And then I'm going to say, yes, all that's true, but this time I'm innocent. I said, I go straight to jail. And I get one of the harshest sentences out there because I'm like a category 3 or 4 on the criminal history level, and none of these things, when you're telling this to the guy who's asking you this silly, inappropriate question, are they thinking about at all? And I have to think about all those things. If I have a buddy with a concealed weapons permit, you're not getting in my car.
Right.
I'm now, they're going to say constructive possession. He had the gun.
Yeah.
Because
a lot of that too.
Right. And it's like, well, okay, but I didn't have the gun. He has it doesn't, I don't want you in the car. I don't want to have to be and try and explain that to somebody. I'm in a bad spot. They'll lock me up in jail for 6 months. Even if they drop the charges and let me go, I'll lose everything. And people just don't realize the position you're in for the rest of your life. For the rest of my life, it is yes, sir, no, sir. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, officer. I was speeding. Thank God you pulled me over. Can I please get the ticket? Here's my license. I mean, I'm the most polite person I've ever been in my entire life because
you have to
I'm
be
perpetually concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's such a good point because that's something that just your life is forever changed in that because you do have that chip has been inserted into your head that this is different now. Yeah. My life, as I think through things and how I do things, I have to factor that in because I know what that whole thing was. And I know I don't want that because that is that's the worst. So you can do anything you can to avoid that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thankful. Sure. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying and honestly, I'm extremely thankful to even be out of prison. Like it just like in your case, if you'd gone to trial because you were hard-headed and because you felt like I really didn't do anything wrong. And you said, you know what, I'm going to go to trial. Listen, you'd have gotten 10 to 15 years.
Sure.
You'd be in prison right now. You'd be hearing about your daughter getting married and you're not going to be there. Or your daughter having a baby, your grandson, you ain't going to be there. It would be horrible.
And I'll tell you, Matt, the other thing that I think about is you also have different moments when you get out where you have this feeling like I've got 3 daughters, so 2 of them have gotten married. Courtney just had twin boys. And there's moments that I share with myself because I think it's that I don't know how to express it to anyone around me, but my thought is, God, just thank God I'm here.
Yeah.
Thank God I'm here. Like if we go on a family trip or something and we're all together, there's a moment where I just thank God I'm here because what a difference that is than not being, because I know what it's like when I've had other things that have gone on and I wasn't there. And there's like that feeling of just complete loss of not being a part of that. And then when you do get out, because you were just talking about the other things that are the chip in your head, there is a chip in my head that is, I do appreciate some of the littler things just because I know that I'm here and not there. And I don't know if that goes away or not. I don't know. I've been out for 6 years now. I haven't gone away yet.
No, I was going to say, sometimes I have to remind myself, like somebody will cut me off when I'm driving and there's a second of anger. And I think, whoa, listen, like, you know what I'm saying? Like the line's too long. And I'm like, you spent 6 months to a year just standing in line in the chow hall and to get your laundry and commissary. Like you can wait. I used to get so upset if I would go to a restaurant and they said, oh, it's a 45-minute wait. I'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to somewhere else. Now, my girlfriend, who was also in prison for like 4 years, you know, we get there and we're just like, and you'll watch 3 couples in a row.
They'll leave.
45 minutes. Oh, no, I'm leaving. Oh, 45 minutes. Oh, can I sit at the bar? Can I this? Can I? Oh, no, I'm going to leave. 45. And they're leaving. And we're like, they're like 45 minutes. I'm like, give me the thing. You know what I'm saying? Or here's my phone number. Like, I
always say that prison was like a Disney World nightmare because everything's lines in Disney World. This was in prison. You know, I want to make a phone call, stand in line. I want to take a shower, stand in line. I want to get on this True Links, Core Links, stand in line. It was just everything you wanted to do was stand in line, unless you went out to the yard, and did whatever. But
Well, even then, you want to watch they had a movie room in Colvin at one point. You want to go to the movie room, stand in line. You want to get something out of the rec equipment,
stand in line.
You want to get your laundry, stand in line. You want to go to commissary. Commissary is 3 hours. That's 2 or 3 hours of sitting there.
But I try to avoid commissary like the plague, but you had to go at some points.
Oh yeah, at some point, yeah. I was gonna say, so how much time did you actually get? Was it 3 years?
No, I got a 5-year sentence. So
did you? You said it was 0 to 3 years.
No, 0 to 5, and then I ended up, Matt. Luckily enough, I was able to get into RDAP, and that knocked a year off. So I really did 3 years.
What did you think of RDAP?
Well, it's fascinating because that thing actually goes on in prison. I've got a couple of different opinions about RDAP. One is I think that the program could be good because I think the guys want to adhere to certain things that are there that they're trying. But I think that the people that are instructing want to be cops, and so for the majority of people that we had, and I'm not saying everybody was, there was a couple of good people that were in the program that were instructors, but for the most part, you had guys that are trying to set people back. If they said something or did something, they gave them 2 more months, or they tried to kick them out of the program, all these different things. And so it was, but as far as a 9-month program that could be good, I think they have some recidivism thing that's a little bit better by people going through it, but I think it could be better. But I think rational thinking and all those things are probably things that should be taught probably in high school,
Yeah, well, but it's not. So
it's not.
So I would like to say that one, you do not get to the top of your field and end up working in the Bureau of Prisons. So for nobody graduates college with a medical degree and says, what are you doing? I'm going for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, a medical position. So,
right.
Or for a drug treatment specialist or whatever they are. So you're not going to get top quality people.
Right.
So, I understand there's always that guy. There's always a jerk here, a jerk there.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I thought that RDAP was for being in prison. I thought it was a great program. I think the concept of the program, maybe they're not run all that well. The concept of the program, I thought was great. And honestly, I think, because, let's face it, it wasn't about drugs.
No, it's about thinking,
behavior modification. And honestly,
exactly.
And really, to me, I think it should be offered to everybody. I think it should.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And there were some really, what am I going to say? There were some things that happened in our little group that would never happen outside of that prison world.
They'd never be in a position to have to really look at themselves and categorize themselves and admit to their behaviors.
One thing I was thinking was when we did those readiness statements, one of the guys got up and he was like, it was the first time that it just really hit him what all had happened. And he just broke down, cried. And nobody cries in prison. No, not usually. I just remember one of the guys got up and right beside him and read his readiness statement. I thought, man, that just, whatever just happened right there was pretty cool. We're in prison and this is all happening right here in front of us. And I think that was the other thing, Matt, that talking about prison, so many people say so many different things about prison, but somebody asked me the other day, what was your biggest surprise about prison? I said, quite honestly, I met a lot of really good people. There were people that weren't good, but there's people that aren't good on the outside. But I was surprised how many people helped me, how many people, were smart, that, really figuring out how to get strategies through their dark places. And for me, that's one of the reasons I started my podcast it was Nightmare Success is in and out, was to talk to the guys, not about why did you do the crime? How did you get through it? What did you feel? What were you thinking? How did you get to the next step in your strategy of what you were doing at that time? And, you know, the guys' stories are all of us, just like you and I can sit here and talk, Matt, we've got a common thread. If we can sit here and talk about our dad because we both went to, we can talk about prison because we both went to prison, but everybody has a different story going into prison and then how they handle prison and then how they get out. So I think that's what makes all those things unique with the podcast Nightmare Success. And I think what happens too is that when people go through dark times and they have strategies of how to get through that, how they adapt and how they survive, I think people listening to that think, God, hell, that could have been me. Or I'm in that spot right now. How do I step out of this? Because everybody, you know, my thought on Nightmare Success, on coining that phrase was everybody, and like you said, Matt, all the visionaries and these books that you read about that built these gigantic turn of the century companies that are changing the world had to walk through their own fears, their own unknowns, their own nightmares to get to where they wanted to be, to set themselves free to whatever success that is. So everybody has that. Everybody builds up prisons in their own mind. And the question is how do you step? How do you take and step into something that's not comfortable? And we saw that in prison so often where, you know, somebody would get so institutionalized that their ugly routine, the one that they did every day because it made them feel like they were in control, got so much into who they were that they got scared of freedom. They got scared of the outside. And I think that happens, you know, once you get out of prison, you start looking around, you see that all over because you see people that, okay, the guy's in a bad marriage. Why didn't he get out of it? You know, he's in a bad job. Why doesn't he step out? Why he had a health crisis? He can step out. So you see people all over the place. What is it? And it's usually stepping into the unknowns because it's scary. But it's the only way to get over to the other side so that there's somebody I saw the other day that was talking about there's two things in life that makes it difficult: staying in your comfort zone or getting out of your comfort zone.
Right.
Yes, either way.
Yeah. I remember, it's funny, the people that I found that were the most miserable in prison were the guys that were two of blaming other people for being there, and two, complaining about the conditions, you know, and, you know, they just complained about everything and they were miserable, and nobody wants to be around you. You're miserable and you're not going to live life like that.
Especially in prison, you know, the environment's not going to change. You're not going to all of a sudden they're going to, oh, you don't like it here? Well, we've got a better place for you right over here. You just should have said something. You just have to adapt to it. You got a plastic chair, a locker, and a bunk bed. Get used to it because that's going to be the way it is.
Right. You know, what's funny is, you know, I always hear these guys, like I'll see, there's a lot of these prison, you know, podcasts and stuff, and they'll do a comparison on what prisons are like in America and what prisons are like, let's say, in Scandinavia. And it's like, they're, you know, of course they're amazing. Right. Yeah. And those prisons are great. But you go, wait a second, like, what are prisons like in, you know, in Venezuela, in Cuba, and, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you guys are saying like, it's, oh, poor me. It's like, you committed a crime. You went to prison. What did you think they were going to treat you like?
Right.
Like, what do you want to be like? I get it.
Yeah.
Time is outrageous, but the environment's not that bad in prison. It's not great.
It's not great.
There's a ton of things they could do better. But
and I think too, Matt, it's interesting to me because, you know, I lived 3 years without air conditioning at Leavenworth, and it gets pretty hot in Kansas. But I'll say this though, you know, the guys knew how to handle it. Like before there was ever air conditioning. First of all, there's probably like 6 or 7 days that's horrible. I mean, it's like 100 degrees. It doesn't get cooler at night, and you sweat in bed, and but really there's only like 6 or 7 days. And what we would all do, and you would get your ass kicked if you didn't do this, you let the window open at night and let whatever cool air there is, if it's, you know, if it gets down to 75 degrees, that's going to be as cool as you get. And then you shut that window in the morning that keeps that in. Anybody who opened up a window, they'd go searching for you because it was like a furnace that come through there and made it hotter. But the only reason I brought that up is that I found that even with that, you can adapt and get used to it. I got used to it. I almost think that you get used to it because you're outside a lot. In fact, I thought it was more, they didn't turn the heat on until the week before Thanksgiving. And in the Midwest, it gets pretty cold, like in October, November. I thought that was worse than the heat. But my whole point is that you make a really good point, is you don't want to talk to somebody who's whining about that, because it's not going to change. You got to just figure it out. You just got to, all of us are dealing with this. So it's not just you. You go figure that out. We don't want to talk to you until you come back and you can hang out and not bitch.
I remember my ex-wife, I would talk to her on the phone, and she would say he was complaining about having to spend $1,500 because her husband's H2, her the Hummer H2, the transmission had just gone out and the warranty had just ended, and there was $1,500, and she was pissed off about that. And I was like, well, do you have the $1,500? Well, of course I have the $1,500. And she was like, even if I didn't, I put on my credit card, I this, I that. Like, you've got multiple kids in private school. You live in a $500,000 house. You guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. You have to spend $1,500. You just got back from a week-long vacation. And I thought, like, you don't have problems. Like, these aren't problems. Spending $1,500 on your brand new Hummer isn't a problem. A problem is they gave me a locker that has 3 shelves in it, and one side has no shelves. And so I bought new shelves, and now the COs are going around looking for that to see who has more than 3 shelves.
Yeah, those contraband
take shelves. My shelves. Like, that's what I'm down to.
Yeah.
And and so I would get thrilled when, they would come out with like the movie schedule on Wednesday nights. They showed movies. Like, what movie are they going to show? And it was like, oh my God, they're showing the new Planet of the Apes. Like, I would talk about that and think about that all week. Or I would get a book that I love. Like, I just got the new Tom Clancy.
Exactly.
It's so good. And
it's funny you talk about the movie thing, because movies were huge at Leavenworth for Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. And we all go into that gymnasium with our plastic chairs, and man, it was a big deal. And the funny thing was too, man, is they say, people walk around like in the yard and whatever. You going to the movie tonight? Hell, like there was a choice. Hell, everybody was going to the movie. What else were we doing? You got to go to the movie tonight? What's the movie? I don't know. You got to go to the movie. But of course you go to the movie. The other thing I always thought that was funny at Leavenworth was that people stole food and made like the pizzas and all these different things. But it was funny because, like, when we went down to the gymnasium, there were people on both sides in the hallway, and they all had their goods. Like this little brownie thing was like 2 stamps, and this was the pizza thing that they'd made with the tortillas and whatever, that was 4 stamps. And so you kind of watch, somebody made popcorn, so you just walk in. It was really actually like a movie. You would pay your stuff and go in. You grab your soda out of the mop bucket, and that was 2 stamps. But it felt like we were walking in, man. We're walking into our own movie, man. We got our own stuff. I got my candy and I've got my soda here, and we're gonna watch. Yeah, but it was a big deal. I mean, that was, I guess that was probably one of the biggest deals that we had. And it was, whether it was a good movie or a bad movie, it was an event for sure.
It's what you were saying too about the people you met, which was shocking to me. Was that I met some of the best people I've ever known.
Yeah.
Like it was it was great.
And I think that's one of the things that, going through the experience that we've gone through, you wouldn't know that unless you go through the experience that we've gone through. The overall society impression is that everybody is bad in there because that's where they are. But there's
no doubt there are. No doubt there are some bad people.
Oh yeah, I certainly don't want to get that impression. No, but for a lot of reasons, there's people. When the very first day I got there, the guy Romo, who was a little Hispanic guy that was a boxer, and he just immediately said, "Man, you don't look like you've ever been here before. You're going to need a lot of help." And he immediately starts helping me with my locker, cleaning it. And he says, we got to make this bed military style because the warden comes through on Friday. Let me show you how to do that. And I just literally had gotten introduced to him, and he, within that, minute or two, he had plugged in and was helping me get to the next step. And
they're the guys that will come to you immediately and say, "Hey, I have a locker for your lock. I have shower slides for you.
Which is huge, by the way.
Yeah, of course. But here's a huge here's a toothbrush.
Yeah.
Here's this. Just give me the shower slides back. Give me this back.
Yeah.
Buy your own lock immediately.
Yeah.
Just give me the stuff back." And you're like, "Well, what do I owe you for that?" Like, no, you don't owe anything. Just give me it back. And here's a couple soups, and it's like,
yeah, it really opens your eyes, and it happens immediately.
Because if it doesn't happen, it sucks.
That's hard time.
It's hard time until you go to commissary and get those things. If you're lucky enough to have somebody that puts money on your books right away.
Exactly.
Like it could be, so yeah, there are some great things that happen. It's funny now thinking about how small they are.
It sounds small when you and I are talking about it, but when you're telling me that, I can't even imagine if somebody wouldn't have given me shower shoes.
Yeah.
What would I have done? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, other than just in general, the filth, but not just that. It's that, you could get staff, you could get, who knows?
And there were guys that had staff. That was another thing I was really scared of him, because we had a guy when we were in RDAP, and that was the other thing you were talking about, man. It was great living in RDAP. I mean, we had all the rules and stuff, but man, it was so much cleaner. I would rather have the rules and stuff and be in a clean place with the bathroom was just, totally clean.
I loved it because it was quiet.
And quiet. You could read. It was like being in a library. Yeah.
It was the best bet to me. That was great.
Yeah, I would, and I think it's surprising that they have that in the BOP. I'm surprised that whole program was able to get, because I do think that's the best thing that the prison system offers. And I'm totally in agreement with you. I don't know why they don't teach it to everybody.
Yeah,
it's in the prison.
So did you write your book when you were locked up?
I didn't. I did it when I got out. And I think one of the things was, I was thinking, Matt, when I was in, I don't know, I was more just like focusing on, day to day. And I probably could have started writing my book then, but I kind of wanted to write it once I got out, just to have maybe a different perspective of what I was doing and what I was saying. But no, I wrote it when I got out, and I think I waited like a couple of years before I started writing. And when you get out, were you 6 years? 6 years in?
What do you mean?
How long were you in prison?
13 years. 13
years. You just doubled it on me. So I can't imagine what 13 years feels like, because for me, I just did 3 of those 13. But it takes you a little bit of while just to kind of get, it's almost like you get sea legs and you got to kind of steady yourself. It's like you're trying to jump in a moving car.
Yeah.
Like, what did I miss? What's going on? How do I fit in? Am I still me? All those things that happen when you get out. I can't imagine 13 years, because 13 years, there is truly a lot of things that happen. There was, what years were you in?
Oh, keep in mind, there were no smartphones when I went in prison.
Yeah.
So I'd never seen like an iPhone.
That'd be crazy.
No Wi-Fi. There's no,
Yeah.
I remember when I first got out, like when I went in, texting had just come out. You couldn't watch YouTube on your phone. You couldn't, none of that was going on.
Yeah.
And when I got out in 2019. I got hired. I went to a gym, a buddy of mine on a gym, went there. And I remember my probation officer had emailed me something saying, you need to print this, fill it out, sign it. And so my buddy goes, "Here, give me your phone." And I said, "Okay." And he said, how do I print this? And he said, well, I got a printer over there. He said, we can print it right now. I said, do I go to a Kinko's? Do I? He goes, there's no Kinko's. He said, there's no Kinko's. He said, he said, it's UPS. He said,
Yeah.
well, I got a printer right there. And I went, yeah, but I got to print this. It's on my phone. It's on my email. And he goes, here, give me your thing. And he goes, hold on. He did. And he goes, all right, I printed it. And now the printer's 40 feet away.
Yeah.
And I go, no, seriously, bro. I said, I need to print
It's like
it.
magic.
And he looked at me, he goes, I printed it. And I went, how?
Mhm.
I go, how? Like I'm like I'm not
It's
stupid.
like magic.
Like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna walk over there. You think it's a joke? And he goes, I go, seriously, bro, I need to print it. And he goes, come here. We walk over, and sure enough, he printed like 12 pages. And I was like, how? And he goes, it's Wi-Fi. I go, what's that? And he goes, oh man. It's like, this is gonna be, I'm gonna explain something to you.
I mean, I just can't, for me, in just the short amount of time of 3 years, I noticed that when I went in, phones didn't have all the notifications and stuff on it. And so when I got out, I noticed that like when I was with my daughters and like we'd be watching TV, they were constantly looking at their phones. I'm like, what are they doing? Why are they watching? Why are they looking at their phones when we're watching TV? That was one of the weird phenomenons that I saw, was like people went from having the phone in their pocket or a woman in their purse or whatever, that they just constantly are looking at their phone. And
Yeah.
I was like, what are you doing? And what's happening is they don't even realize that phone all of a sudden has notifications on it all the time. And you're just constantly looking at it with whatever you're doing. You could be watch TV or movie or whatever. Everybody's just looking at their phones.
Well,
that was a weird thing, because that wasn't that way when I went in. That was just in 3 years.
13 years. Imagine we would go to a restaurant or anywhere we would go, and there's 20 tables, and 95% of everybody is sitting there with their spouse or 3 other people, and all 3 of them are just staring at their phone. They're not even talking.
Yeah.
And I was like, and people are walking by, and I thought people
That had to freak you out.
and people had earbuds in. And
Yeah.
they were walking around talking, having conversations,
Looking like they're talking to themselves.
I'm thinking people are talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I told them, and I'm like, yeah, what? But they just have earbuds in. They're having conversations on the telephone, and I don't know. That took me a couple days to realize that I wasn't crazy.
Yeah.
They weren't crazy. They were, they had earbuds. And
What do you think getting out was your biggest? Was it just technology? Was it technology that was like the big piece that was like?
Yeah, the technology, because it's hard to ask people questions, because younger people, they think you're an idiot if you ask them,
because it's just they've done them since they were born, so it's
right. They have
natural.
no idea. And then even other people that understand the situation, they still talk to you in such a way that you're like, okay, you're talking French right now. Like, I don't understand. You're telling me to airdrop this, and you're telling me, well, go to your settings.
What's airdrop?
Right. Or
what's Dropbox? Yeah.
Or go to your settings and turn on airdrop.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're saying. I don't even know what settings mean. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. And so it took time, but I got buddies that have been out, the whole time now, and I'm now showing them how to do things on their phones, and I'm explaining to them to do them. They're like, bro, like, you really adapted to this very, like, I edit my own clips. I edit all kinds of stuff. I make videos. I do. So I've really jumped into it.
You picked up on it quick.
Yeah. I don't think I'm great, but
but you got to be willing to learn and do it too. And that's, a lot of people are really scared. People, especially older people, are really scared to try something that's they think that's going to explode or something. If you do something on the computer, it's going to explode, or the phone will quit working if you do something. It freaks them out.
Yeah,
I get it. I'm a little bit like that.
I start hitting buttons. I get frustrated. I get the anxiety is overwhelming. But I'm also, just like you said, I'm like, I think most people, I'm sure you've heard this. So, like, most people have, like, they have, throughout their life, they have multiple multi-million-dollar ideas.
Sure.
The problem is most people are just unable to pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm big on pulling the trigger, and I'm okay with failing.
Yeah.
Like I've
You
failed
have to
my way
fail.
through life.
I think that's maybe one of the biggest misunderstandings for people where they think, oh man, I don't know how he did that in business. Well, most of it is just doing it. And then you figure out, oh, well, that didn't quite work. I'm going to have to readjust that. That's not a failure. That's a mistake that you don't want to repeat. So in business, a lot of times you get ideas. Like I loved getting, especially when I was in my 20s, looking at something and saying, oh my God, I could take that and implement it over here and maybe tweak it a little bit. And then I don't even have to try to figure it out. I've already got it. And that happened like 2 or 3 times to me where I called somebody, they talked to me, and they gave me their stuff. And I was like, oh my God. And all it was reaching out to them, creating a conversation. Like, one time it was reading an article about this one guy and he was just blowing things up. And I called him and I said, man, you're doing this really cool stuff. And I noticed down at the bottom here, they kind of buried it, but you're doubling market share where nobody's doubling market share. What are you doing? He said, well, young Cassity, he said, nobody's asked me that question. Why don't you fly out here and see me? I flew out there and saw that guy, and it changed everything in this one division we had. And if I could teach anything to kids, it would be to do that. Don't be afraid to go and talk, because usually somebody who's doing something that they're really good at, they'd like to talk about it a little bit because, they're good at it. So they might want to say, yeah, this is how I did it. But if you don't ask them, they don't tell you. So to me, that's like one of the secret formulas. Like when we blew up and got big in our company, a lot of it was other people's. We had some unique ideas, but a lot of it was taken from other people's ideas that we implemented into our business, and we were able to take off with it in a different industry. And I think, if there's any tips out there for this old guy, 55 years old, is keep your eyes open, because a lot of the answers to what you're looking for are in the market. You can take those and we'll then go back to what you said, Matt. Do it, engage, take action with it, because you're going to make mistakes. But as long as you're taking action, that like puts you like in the 20 percentile. Everybody else, the 80 percentile, they're sitting there watching you on the sidelines, wishing they were in the game, but they just don't have the guts to get out there on the field. That's the real secret sauce to the whole thing. Is so many people are just afraid to go out and say, I want to play, let me in.
Yeah.
That's that. And if you do that, you start gaining confidence. You start saying, well, how I belong out here. I don't know. Well, these guys aren't as tough as I thought they were. I can play with this. And I think that's the secret. But you got to step into it. And that's the thing that just scares the shit out of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I don't want to go off on a tangent. It's just, I was gonna say, like, there was multiple guys in prison. There was a guy in prison. The short version is like, he never had a driver's license. He never got arrested when he was like 19 years old. Like he was a hacker. And I think he got in trouble when he was, I think he was 19 or 20 when he got arrested.
Young.
Heroin addict. He did like 6 years, didn't know what he was going to do, had never had a real job. Just, and I was like, yeah, but you like kind of hacking. Well, I mean, yeah, but I can't do that. I said, yeah, but there are legal ways to do it.
Yeah. And
I was like, you ought to get, I'm sure there are certificates you can get. No, I can't work in that industry and I can't I'm in here for hacking. And I said, right. I said, listen, let me explain something. And at that point I'd been locked up like 10 or 11 years. I said, I've been locked up like 11 years. I said, you know how many guys have been locked up for the charge of hacking?
Yeah.
And he goes, no. And I said, almost nobody.
Right.
Almost no one. I said, that is specific. If I was you, I would lean into that. I would tell everybody that's what I was locked up for. I said, that makes you dangerous, makes you brilliant, it makes you interesting. The federal government mounted an entire task force to catch you because you were so smart. I said, and they gave you 6 years for a crime that most of these guys get 18 months for. And I said, listen, I said, you need to lean into that. So he found out there were multiple certificates had to get, classes. Yeah. He did that. He took as soon as he got out, he did those things. He then got a job working for you. And I had told him this, like, yeah, you're not going to be able to go work for like IBM. But there's a lot of these companies hire sub companies You could
Sure.
probably work for one of them. That's what he did. He went and got a job working for a small company that their services were
It's highly sought after what he was doing.
right,
I
huh?
mean, it's highly sought after
Oh,
for what he was
absolutely. He
doing. I
had
mean,
no idea.
people pay big money for that.
This kid's making like $150,000,
Yeah,
and he's only been doing it like 4 or 5 years. Like with it,
that's cool
in the
though.
first year, he was making 100,000. Second year, it's a little over. He's now making $150,000 to $160,000. Constantly has headhunters calling him,
Yeah.
and he's a felon, and everybody knows. Everybody knows.
And I think a lot of that too is, first of all, you helped him out. You helped him get focused on what he had that was his magic.
Yeah,
do his magic wand.
I always tell, like, I get tons of guys that ask me questions, got young kids that,
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like, to me, I bumbled my way through life, but
Got a
they
lot
ask
of
me questions.
experience.
Well, and I tend to give them, they're like, well, what would you say about this? I'm like, I'm going to give you the same advice like, I'm not going to tell you
Yeah.
anything amazing, but then when I tell it to them, I realize
It's a little different.
well, I don't know if, that I don't think they don't have anybody to tell them these things. It's like,
Yeah, I guess that maybe that could be it too.
Right.
They're hearing it for the first time. Sure.
Yeah. Find something you love
Mm-hmm.
that you're interested in, that you're not going to mind doing the rest of your life, and lean into that and find a way to make that pay you. And don't do it for the money, because if just try and be the best at it, because if you're the best at it, then the money will come.
Yeah. And I think another thing I was thinking while you were talking there, Matt, like another thing that I used in prison is to try to win the day. And my daughter had a calendar that she gave me every year that had like our family pictures in it and everything. And so I filled out that little box every night on the calendar. I was trying to find something that happened, even in prison, like what happened. I can say happened good today. Here's what happened today. What happened good. And one of the things I did to try to keep myself from falling down into a slippery slope was not fill out 2 bad boxes. That I win the day, one day at a time. Don't get too far ahead of yourself, because like with you had, a much bigger sentence than me. But for me, a 5-year sentence, looking at that, 5 years out, that just seems overwhelming. It's day to day, and then don't fall down the trap. Day to day, don't fall down the trap. So that's one of the things I used is that try to find something. And then if I did have a bad day, I wasn't trying to win all days. If I had a really bad day, I went all the way down. It was a really shitty day, and I went all the way down with it. But I didn't want to go down 2 days with it, because then I knew that could turn into a week, that could turn into a month, that could turn into a year. And I became that guy that was in the fetal position over there. And that's what always scared me. So that was a strategy of mine, was don't fill out 2 bad boxes. Don't do it, because that you get slippery slope there in prison. And I always thought, and because you see them all around you, you see the good ones that are trying to make it work, and you see the ones that have given up, and you think, oh my God, I hope that doesn't ever happen to me, because that can happen.
Yeah.
You get a bit of bad news, and bad news in prison is really bad news in prison. Feels that much worse.
So when you did get out, you went to what, a halfway house?
Yeah, God, I went to a terrible halfway house. And the thing about not that there's a great halfway house. The one in St. Louis is the oldest halfway house in the United States of America. And it is, as they all are, not in good areas. And this is in a horrible area on Cope Brilliant Boulevard, in the ugliest, most crime-ridden street in St. Louis. I mean, the things that happen around that halfway house are only drugs and shootings and whatever else you can come up with. And then we're all there. I mean, before I got there, the guy, he must have snitched on somebody, and he came out of the, that front glass door, and they just mowed him down in a drive-by. So you always thought about, like, when I'm leaving that front door, it was weird though, because it was so locked down. We were like with 150 guys, and they had this big glass area that you couldn't get out of, it was all locked down. And it was worse than prison. And I spent 8 weeks there. I had no idea why I had to spend that much time there, because I had a place to go. My wife, I had a job, and I still spent 8 weeks there. And it was like the dirtiest and strangest and worst place I'd ever spent. Well, no, Warrenton County Jail was the worst place I've ever spent, but this one was dirtier. But I was glad to get out of there. And it's certainly, they're so bad, they get written up about all the time here in St. Louis, and they got their contract taken away from them. And they were supposed to open up a new a new halfway house, and they somehow didn't get the contractors done, and so it reverted back. And so now they're year by year at the Dismas house, so they're still alive. It's still going on.
So you were there for 8 weeks. Did you go home on a like ankle monitor or?
Yeah, I did, and that was kind of unique because when I got there, they had just got a new contract renewed, and that ankle monitors was part of the new contract, and so they never had ankle monitors ever. And so the month before, they get these ankle monitors. So I get an ankle monitor stripped on me, tacked to my ankle, and I thought, because always what they had done, I don't know if this happened with you, Matt, but they made 3 phone calls a night, starting from 9 o'clock until 6 o'clock in the morning, and you had to have a landline. And if you didn't answer it, then you had to come back to the halfway house. Well, they didn't stop doing that, even though they strapped us on with the ankle monitor. So I had the ankle monitor, and I had 3 of those contacts a night, which just was like you wake up and like, holy shit, okay, I answered, because your thought is, if I don't answer, they're going to send me back. And then I had a defective ankle monitor because they were all these old ankle monitors. They didn't get new ones. And I had a defective ankle monitor that wouldn't hold a charge. And if it doesn't hold a charge, that also sends you back. So I kept telling my case manager, hey, my ankle monitor, oh no, you just need to charge it. And so I finally, after a couple of days, they kept ringing that I was escaping. And I said, no, it doesn't charge. And so they finally cut it off and they put another one on. So it took a little anxiety off of the situation. But it's so hard to tell people like what kind of anxiety that is, because here I am at work, and I'm back into this new job, and this damn ankle monitor is going, and it's flashing red, and it won't, and that means it's going down to the big panel down there that I'm escaping from my BOP world custody. It was crazy. But after that first week, I was fine.
So what was the job you got when you got out?
Well, it's funny because I went back to, there was a friend of mine that had a dealership. There's a GMC Buick dealership, and when I got back, they were having problems, and it was with the floor plan lender, and it was kind of getting worse and worse, and that only lasted like a year. But I was almost had like PTSD because you had these state people coming in, and they were trying to see if this was good. I was like, this doesn't feel good, and then it went under because of the floor plan thing. And so I went out and found another job with a friend of mine whose dad had spent time in prison, and we'd stayed in close contact. And so I went to work with him, and that's where I've been since. It's a real estate company, and I work with people on more or less coaching them, the agents, that you're not a salesperson. You need to set up your business and have a plan, and how you work that plan and get a system and processes going. So that's what I do, which is kind of second nature to me. So I don't have a license to go out and sell real estate. But I don't know if I want a license to go out and sell real estate, but I like what I'm doing.
You could probably get one.
I could.
I actually having co-defendants and people I know that have fraud charges, and they've ended up getting real estate licenses.
I think I could do it. The only difference is when you're an ex-felon, especially here in Missouri, you do have to go up before the board, and they have to make special consideration, all that. So you do have to take the extra steps with it, but maybe one of these times I'll do it.
Like if you haven't violated, if you're not a multiple offender, and you're not, and you've completed your probation, you get it.
Yeah. I'm a pretty boring ex-felon, I guess.
Yeah. Which is good.
That's what they like. Yeah. But in the meantime, I do that. I like doing it because it's something I know. I feel like I'm not wasting what I use to build our other sales company. So I kind of get to use that as something that I know. So I feel good about that, not wasting that. But then one of the things when I was walking that fence in Leavenworth, I thought, what am I going to do now? This is really bad. All this time I thought I was making a difference in building this company and felt really good about it. Now I'm in prison. What am I going to do? I thought, well, I'll use my experience. I'll take this experience and I'll write a book and talk about the journey, because a lot of it's good, a lot of it's good, and then it gets really, really bad, and then it gets good again. So, but I want people to know that it's okay, that you'll survive. It's okay. It's like I said, there's nothing as bad as your mind makes it out to be. You will make it. I want to encourage people to take that step out of whatever they're in so that they can don't stand on the sidelines. You don't want to be the guy, the 85-year-old rocking in the rocking chair thinking, God, I wish I would have done that. I was so good at that. I wish I. So that's really the reason why I wrote the book. And as I got writing that book, I thought I was doing, guesting on podcasts. I thought I had to do a podcast. And I thought, gosh, I got 50 people in my phone list on my Facebook. I just talked to people about, life before prison, life in prison, life out of prison, all guys I was with at Leavenworth, and then it kind of expanded out. But it was all about how'd you get through it? What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? How do you adapt? How do you survive? And then what? And so we got into all those crazy, unique stories. That was about a year ago, and I love it. It's really a passion of mine. And I think there's like 2 or 3 things that come from it. One is are we prison creatures? I mean, I don't think so, man. I think we can have normal conversations with people, but people don't know that because they don't really know people who've gone to prison. The second thing is we talk about not really like Dateline, that person did the crime and this is how they did it. This was more about what were you thinking? How did you make it? And what were your strategies to get through it? And then what were you feeling? And then what did you do? And those end up being things that people can relate to and use those strategies. And the second or the third last thing is, as you know, a lot of good guys are trying desperately to get a second chance out there. And I hope that when they listen to these stories, they see the narrative, the ugly narrative that they might have read or whatever that's in their community. This guy just wants to get back out and make it. And maybe by listening to this and you see the commonalities, that you'll give that person a second chance. If you run across somebody who's been in prison, give them a shot, because, as we all know, the percentages are so horrible. Is it 2/3 and go back in 3 years, 3/4 and 5? And there's all kinds of reasons for that. But if we have more avenues for people to understand a little bit more of people who've been in prison and give them a second chance, I think that those people will fight like hell to keep their job.
Well, how long has the podcast? You said 1 year. Is it?
Yeah.
Is it on it's on what, Spotify? It's on
Spotify, Apple, Odyssey. Yeah.
You put it on YouTube?
I put the people on YouTube that I've done just like we're doing today. Well, if they come into my studio thing, I don't have the camera to film. So that's going to be my next step. I actually just want to film everything, not just the people that aren't. But most of them are actually on YouTube because most of the people aren't in St. Louis. They're all over the place.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's good. But
I'm not as worldly with you as you are with YouTube. YouTube's like a whole nother world, I think. And there's something about YouTube I read the other day is that you like on Instagram or Facebook, you're scrolling. You're scrolling. YouTube, you're searching. It's a search engine. And
right.
So how you market and how you brand and how you do that, it's a little bit different. So
right. Well, you still have
I'm always learning.
You have a feed like that. They'll still recommend things to you. Like if you just go to your homepage and you haven't put anything in, it will tell you like, hey, here's some stuff you might like. Yeah. You can scroll. Sometimes you do that and you haven't
on the side there. Yeah.
Anything. They're telling you
here's what you like.
Yeah. They're suggesting to you, hey, this is what's going on in Ukraine. I noticed you looked at 30 videos yesterday.
You still want to know?
Right. Here's something on World War II. You watch a lot of these documentaries on World War II. Here's stuff So I know that the great thing too, also, by the way, and I don't know what it is with Spotify and all these things is YouTube. And you probably know this, you have a channel, but like the analytics are great.
Really good analytics. Yeah.
Like for free. Yeah. Like it's,
Well, and I don't know that people really realize how much they use YouTube. I mean, YouTube's the platform to go to.
Yeah.
Between that and Google.
People send me stuff like, hey, you ought to read this article on this guy. Like, listen, I'm not reading a 30-minute article. So I immediately go to YouTube and punch in the guy's name. Yeah. And then somebody the article came out 2 days ago. Somebody's already made a video.
Yeah.
or I watch
Yeah.
something on it, or somebody starts talking, or there's 6 videos on this rapper that got shot
Yeah.
that you wanted
Yeah.
me to read about. Well, I'm not going to read about it, but I can listen to these 4 podcasts. So yeah, it's a great platform, especially for someone like me who, hates to read.
Did you
But
read in prison?
I read all the time. I read for
Yeah.
about 3 years straight, like you were saying, probably a book, maybe 2 books a week.
Yeah.
And then I got burnt out on that, and then I started writing,
Yeah.
and then I wrote my memoir,
Uh-huh.
and then I wrote a memoir for a guy named Ephraim Deveroli. I don't know if you ever saw the movie War Dogs.
You know what? I think I saw that a while back. But that's a great movie, right?
Yeah, Jonah Hill
Yeah.
plays.
Yeah.
Jonah
Oh,
Hill
they're the guys. They're the guys that do the guns and stuff over in
Yeah, the
Afghanistan, right?
ammunition.
Yeah. I
Well,
saw
guns
that.
and ammunition, but
Yeah.
yeah. So the
That's a
main
true
character,
story.
I know the guy that Jonah Hill plays,
Yeah.
the fat guy.
Yeah.
His name's Ephraim Deveroli. When I was in prison, I wrote his memoir,
Okay.
and that was published. And then I got some guys in Rolling Stone magazine, and I wrote a book on that one. It's called Generation Oxy. It got renamed by the publisher. Like, when you sell your publishing rights,
then they do whatever they want.
right. I called it Oxy Rush. They changed it.
Mhm.
The article ended up being called the Dukes of Oxy, and that got optioned. The film rights got optioned, and the kids' life rights got optioned. And, of course, I got a piece of that. And then
Were you writing though? Were you writing, Matt, like early in your early life? Like
I wrote a book when I was outside, but never got it published. Like, I wrote a manuscript and put it in my drawer at work. Because once I started my mortgage company, I had like 12 guys working there. And then you kind of stop being a mortgage broker. I started being just like a manager. I'm like, it's all I can do to pay the bills,
Yeah.
to train people, to look over their documents, to, I have to get approved. You got to get approved as an FHA lender, a VA lender, subprime, with all these different companies.
Sure.
So that's a lot of paperwork, and it's constantly being updated and just doing the books and the taxes. And before you know it, it's like I don't close loans anymore,
Right.
now. But I did have downtime, and so I started writing. I wrote a book called The Associates. I never got it published. And
Sounds like a Grisham book.
It's so funny because that's really what it was.
Huh.
He actually came out with 10 or 15 years later, he came out with a book called The Associate.
Okay. I probably read that.
Yeah. But I came out with The Associates, and it was about a mortgage broker who got in trouble. And so I write about this mortgage broker that gets in trouble. And then, of course, I get in trouble.
Right.
And then I go off. And then so the media, somebody had given the FBI that book. And the media, some of the reporters got the book, and they were like, this guy wrote about his crimes before he even committed them. And it's a memoir, and it's a how-to. And it's like, it's none of those things.
That's fiction.
Yeah, to me, I always say, look, it is, the lead character was a broker. I was a broker. But it is as much an autobiography as the firm is an autobiography, because John Grisham happens to also be a lawyer.
Exactly.
Like, he's a lawyer, writes about lawyers. These books are not all autobiographies.
Right.
So, but that, it added flame. It added a gasoline flame of the media attention that was involved in my case. And so, but yeah, so when I went into prison, I just started writing these guys' stories and their synopses, and I started, optioning the stories. And then I got out, of course, and I optioned more stories. And, so it just turned into something. And now I've optioned a bunch of stories, and I've got some of them being turned into, we're getting documentaries done. And
yeah, that's fun stuff.
It sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
In the meantime, none of it's paying my bills. It always sounds good.
It does. It sounds awesome.
Wow, things are happening. Like, they're not really happening that fast.
Right. Right.
But yeah, so you've been doing the podcast, you're working on it, you're gonna transition a little bit more to YouTube and start videoing.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually working with some guys out in LA that we're talking about possibly taking the Nightmare Success idea and expanding that brand to TV in form of streaming. So I don't know what all happened, but I really like what I'm doing. I've really kind of created a new passion for finding these stories, interviewing these people, going out and speaking about it. And like I'm going down next week to speak to the University of Missouri Business School. I went and spoke last year, and I like all that. So
Yeah.
I really thought, walking that fence, will I really ever feel like myself again? I do. I really do. I feel like, uh, and I think you said this earlier, Matt, is find that passion, find the thing that gets you up that you feel like it's not working. And that's, in this last year, I've really felt that. Just feel like I've kind of hit what I know. I don't have to, what you and I sat around and talked about today, both of us can talk about it probably 6 hours or more, because we know it. We know it. We lived it. And, that's bringing out, more of that so people can become familiar with it and not have such a stigma to it. That can be a good thing. And there's a lot of people doing really good stuff. I mean, there's people, I think I've interviewed almost 50 people now, and they're like, some of the people I'm talking to, if we could just put an umbrella over the top of that so that we could do that kind of good stuff everywhere for what's going on, it'd be great.
Well, I mean, that's great. And I appreciate you, taking the interview. And
I love it. I appreciate you having me on, man. And Tyler, connecting us up. It was great.
yeah, Tyler's great. He's he's been helping me out for like a year or so now. Well, okay, so you've got the podcast. I'll put I won't. My video. Colby will put all of your links in
Okay.
In the description box.
Perfect.
And there, he does upload these things to like I forget. I think he uses Anchor, and then Anchor puts it on Spotify.
I use Anchor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for people that are listening to it, then obviously it's the Nightmare Success In and Out.
Yep.
Yeah,
Nightmare Success In and Out. And the book is Nightmare Success: Loyalty, Betrayal, Life Behind Bars, Adapting, and Finally Breaking Free, and Memoir. I have to read that because I always forget the second.
I was gonna say that's
subtitle.
a hell of a.
Yeah.
It's a hell
Nightmare
of a,
Success is the name of the book, but the subtitle thing I have to kind of look at.
Okay, so yeah, we'll put all the links in the description, and I appreciate you taking the time and talking with me. And is there anything else you can think of?
No, man, it's been great. I've appreciate you're a great interviewer and a great show, and I like your stuff, man. Doing good. You're doing good stuff.
Listen, I don't know what I'm doing. I appreciate you guys watching, and that was my interview with Brent Cassity. And check out his podcast. Also, if you guys like the video, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Also, leave me a comment in the comment section. I try and respond to as many comments as I can. I don't know that I get them all, but I definitely read almost every comment that's out there. Well, probably 80%. So I appreciate you guys watching, and thank you very much. And if you like the channel and you want to try and support the channel, I have a Patreon, and I appreciate it. And check out my Patreon. All of everything we've talked about and anything related to me and Brent will be in the description box, and I appreciate it. So thanks a lot. See you.